The Gaston County Museum of Art and History has had the honor over the past several years to host the Martin Luther King Jr. Day Breakfast. But due to constraints caused by the pandemic, we've not been able to do that this year. In lieu of this, we have put together two videos we feel highlight the life and legacy of this great American hero. First, we have some reflections from Dr. Edgar E. Malker. He is a native of Gaston County and a graduate from North Gaston High School. Dr. Malker spent 30 years in Montgomery County Public School System in Rockville, Maryland, where he served in the capacity of a classroom teacher, a science department content specialist, a middle and high school assistant principal, and a middle school principal. Dr. Malker, though, considers himself an equality warrior, a woke activist, and a lifelong learner. Through his work, he feels strongly it is important to educate, empower, inform, engage, and enlighten individuals toward meaningful equity, inclusivity, equality, diversity, and social justice causes. Today, he will be sharing some thoughts on the importance of Martin Luther King's legacy and what Dr. King may have to tell us today.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his life for our healing. The values he stood for of acceptance, equality, peace, and nonviolent protests have echoed throughout 5 decades. I would like to offer a few insights on what that legacy of peace, equality, and justice mean for us today and what work still needs to be done. If Dr. King were with us today, he would not have been comfortable with our current state of being, but rather concerned about the direction some leaders have taken. If he had not been killed in 1968, we would be on a different trajectory in terms of race, culture, equality, diversity, equity, inclusivity, and social justice. The night before Dr. King was assassinated, he delivered a sermon at the Mason Temple in Memphis. You may recall that Dr. King was in Memphis to support striking sanitation workers. He spent boundless energies on issues such as the Vietnam War, economic justice, and government corruption in the United States and abroad. In this final sermon at the Mason Temple, he talked about how he was, despite the tribulations from people struggling to achieve justice and peace. As an imperfect human being, this traditional Black leader, and the drum major for justice, Dr. King is one of the most quoted Black men. His words are like scripture. His name is evoked. His speech referenced during every racial crisis we confront. When he spoke, millions listened. Through his writings, teachings, and speeches, he was left of the mainstream. He was too Black and too radical for most America. He drank from the roots deep in Black culture. He bathed in Black language. He told the truth about being Black in America, in many ways as no one else could. He understood what white folk could hear. He knew what they could listen to as well as what they could bear. He understood when and how to pressure them to do the right thing. And as a way to control him, the FBI labeled him as the most dangerous Negro of his time. Early in his career, Dr. King believed in the essential goodness of white America. He trusted most whites to put away their bigotry and hatred in the face of Black suffering. In the last 3 years of his life, he grew far more skeptical of the ability of the willingness of white folk to change. He concluded sadly that most whites are unconscious racists. In sermon after sermon before Black congregations, Dr. King lashed out at American racism. Just 2 weeks before his death, he announced with a broken heart, "Yes, it is true. America is a racist country." Based on this announcement, he knew most white people in America did not care about racial equality as it related to the criminal justice system, police bias against minorities, or police brutality against Black people. Why, you may ask? Because in their minds, these issues did not affect them. That is why Dr. King's legacy is so important to this moment. Throughout the course of his adult life, he preached to people and used the gospel as a model to express his ideas in his fight for justice. As a Southern Baptist minister, he chose to take a stand in a time of challenge and controversy, rather than in comfort and convenience. In Eddie Gladd's recent book entitled Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and its urgent lessons on our own, he wrote about Baldwin's understanding of the American condition around a set of practices that constitute the lie, which were several sets of lies with a single purpose. Gladd referred to the lie as the value gap, which is that American white lives have always mattered more than lives of others. The lie is a broad and powerful construct of false assumptions. These assumptions support the everyday order of American life. One set of life debases Black people. Another part involves the lies about American history and about the trauma that America has visited throughout the history on people of color, at home and abroad. But the lies most exceedingly harmful affect when it comes to our history. It is to malform events to fit the story when America's innocence is threatened by reality. In 1957, James Baldwin was commissioned by Harper's Magazine to write on the civil rights movement. Baldwin first became acquainted with Dr. King during a trip through the South. Baldwin's exposure to King and the Southern racism had a profound influence on his writing and helped deepen his lifelong commitment to social justice. Like Baldwin, Dr. King struggled with America's commitment to the belief that white people mattered more and to the lie that made this belief palatable. According to Gladd, we now live in the after times, when the promise of Black Lives Matter and the attempt to achieve a new America have been challenged by the election of Donald Trump, whose victory represented yet another failure of America to face the lies it tells itself about race. The United States has confronted two crucial moments of moral reckoning, where we face the daunting challenge of beginning again. Both times, we have failed. The first was during the Civil War and Reconstruction. The second was the Black freedom struggle of the mid-20th century. What is needed now is a third American founding, wherein becoming white is no longer the price of the ticket. Instead, we should set to imagine the country in the full light of its diversity and with an honest recognition of its sins. It must happen in the context of a political transformation, and it must involve a complete rejection of the way we have conducted politics up until now. Gladd also suggests we can find hope and guidance through our own after times. Begin Again seeks to bear witness to the difficult truth of race in America, from slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow segregation, whiteness, and present-day white privilege, and the new Jim Crow caucus. Gladd concluded, our society requires an honest reckoning and acknowledgement of what we have done. This begins with the South. There is so much blood in our soil. This region is key to the country's salvation. Much of America's success has depended upon the exploitation of a particular group of people. Gladd further suggests the history of racism in this country oftentimes does not speak directly and openly about race, but rather through privilege, power, and entitlement. Those who possess one or more of these will have a willful blindness to racism. Race makes class hurt more. Whiteness has privilege and power connected to it, no matter how poor you are. There are those of us, based on our own experience, who understand what race is and what racism is when we see it and when we hear it. The failure is to see color only benefits white America. If Dr. King were with us today, he would say, I have long believed that inequality is the greatest threat to justice, and that white supremacy is the greatest threat to democracy. That is why today we must renew our commitment to protect our democratic values and institutions from all enemies, foreign and domestic, especially those falsely disguised as patriots. It is time to build politics of love, compassion, and decency. It is also time to deal with the fact America has been built on a lie, and it is time to accept the truth that racism and white supremacy exist as a result of these intentional and explicit online warnings and offline actions hidden in plain sight. Since Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, much time has passed, and society has strayed away from his ideas and forgotten whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. Now more than ever, it is important to keep his dream and his memory alive and hold those threatening to undermine it accountable. If we want to honor and fulfill Dr. King's dream, we must commit to making a social change in lifestyle. Our level of peaceful and nonviolent activism cannot be passing trends that get activated amid a crisis and then simply set aside. We must be willing to stand up and speak out. Be the voice for the voiceless. Work to bring back political civility and discourse. Protest for marginalized communities. Stand with someone who does not have privilege. Work for the person who does not yet have peace. Work on behalf of those without full rights and humanity, and without bias, microaggression, or judgment. Embrace the differences in others. Above all, put love and peace into practice to heal the hurt and mistrust of the lie that debases others over democratic principles and the rule of law. Dr. King laid the foundation long ago, and we must become social change ambassadors in our everyday lives. If the dream is to be fully fulfilled, be the change. As a woke activist, I will continue my quest for making noise, getting into good trouble, and making necessary trouble. Will you? Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. May God continue to bless us all in the days to come. Although a moral reckoning is upon us, much more remains to be done and undone. I believe we can emerge, and we are emerging to become a more unified, more equal, more just, and more American America in his way. The time is always right to do what is right.